Hey guys, thanks for joining Learn to Play. My name is Lance, and today we're going to take a look at Shadows of Brimstone's first expansion, Caverns of Cynder. This is a nice new expansion that adds a completely new world to explore, and a new monster type, the Lava Man, as well as some other tokens and features that will add and enhance your game. So in the video itself, I'm going to go ahead and take a look at some of the new features of this expansion. We're going to look at some of the new map tiles and their effects and different tokens that go along with them, and some of the other nice new features that are featured in this expansion. So let's head to the table and I'll teach you how to play. Alright, so the first thing we're going to look at is some of the new tokens that you'll get with Caverns of Cynder. Now these aren't all the tokens, but these are some of the more important ones, or ones that you'll probably use more often. So the first one we have are modifier tokens, which will modify some of the different hero stats. So let's say, for example, your health defense went down to a 4+, you could drop that token in there and now you have a 4+. On the other side, we also have the modifier tokens for permanent stats. So let's say his cunning went up to a 5, he could replace that with a 5, and now we know what he has. On the opposite side of all these tokens, we have the green value, which is for the monsters, and even we have values that go from 20, 25, and 30 for the monsters as well. So if they have high level hit points or something like that, we're good there. After that, we have lava tokens, which we're going to take a look at in a minute. Hellfire tokens, burning marker, liquid darkstone, and one of the favorite parts of this expansion for me was the chip token values, and these are great for tracking experience so that you don't have to use a pen and paper throughout the adventure. These are really handy, especially if you have one person kind of doing the DM type stuff, which I do with a lot of my games that I run. So I handle all the experience and gold and stuff. So these are really handy for me. I can just throw these values at the players and they can just keep track of those that way, and then towards the end of the mission we'll total them up, or they can keep track of them throughout the mission to know if they need to go up in experience or whatnot. Alright, so the next thing we're going to look at are the global rules for Caverns of Cynder. And as you would expect, a world that's made up of fire and molten lava, it has immense heat. So to represent this, at the start of each hero's activation, they will automatically take one hit for every piece of clothing that they have currently equipped. Now, a couple things to note about this is that items may be equipped or unequipped at the start of each turn, so the heroes may find it helpful unequipped clothing until they need it for fights or other things. Another thing to keep in mind is that clothing that is unequipped will not give you any of the bonuses that go along with it. On the plus side, heroes are +1 to their maximum grid. So if you're starting out with a basic hero that has a max grid of 2, if they're playing in Caverns of Cynder, then they will have a max grid of 3. Alright, so the next thing we're going to look at are one of the tiles that are included with Caverns of Cynder, and some of the effects that we'll find on those tiles. So as you can see, there are spaces that are highlighted in yellow, and they have a number up in the top corner. These are considered lava spaces, and when a hero enters a lava space, they must roll a d6 to attempt to safely navigate that space without being burned. So with a hero, if the hero moves onto the space, they're going to roll their dice. If they roll equal to or higher than the value listed there, then they're okay, they're safe on that space. If they roll less than that value, then they're going to go ahead and roll another dice and take D3 burn markers. So with that one we got 2, and we'll cover burn markers in just a little bit. Now if we have a hero that has an agility of 4 or higher, and they move onto a space, they get to roll 2 dice and take whichever one is higher to pass their test. Alright, so a couple things to note. Lava spaces only affect heroes when they enter the space, and not if they start their turn on the space. So say at the start of our turn, we have our Saloon Girl, and she's on a space. She doesn't have to make a check, only if she moves to another space that has a check on it, but she can move out of that space and be okay. Enemies are never affected by lava spaces. The only exception to this is if a hero causes an enemy to be moved into a lava space with an ability or item. The enemy will then take D3 burn markers. Alright, so one other thing with lava spaces is that we also have lava tokens that will add new spaces to tiles or worsen spaces that are already on tiles. And as you can see, the tokens are 5+, so the tokens are really nasty, and all the tokens that you get are 5+. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at the burn markers now. And burn markers represent a model catching fire or being splattered by hot lava and being continuously burned over many turns. So at the beginning of a model's turn, if they have any burn markers on their model or on their character sheet, you can remove one of those burn markers from that model or sheet, and that character will take 2 damage or 2 wounds, ignoring defense. Another thing to keep in mind is that there are no limits to the number of markers that a hero can have. Alright, so now let's go ahead and take a look at the Hellfire tokens. And Hellfire tokens represent bursts of concentrated Hellfire that will scorch anything in their path. If for some reason a Hellfire token needs to bounce, it's going to work just like a stick of dynamite does. You can only have 1 Hellfire token per space. So once a Hellfire token lands on its final space, any model that's on that space will take 1 hit, which will cause 2d6 wounds. If a hero is hit by Hellfire, then the hero is allowed to have a defensive roll as normal to try to avoid this damage. If an enemy is hit by Hellfire, then you're going to subtract its defensive value from the damage done. Alright, so now we're going to take a look at one of the new map tiles for Caverns of Cynder. This one has 2 black areas that do not have any lines on it, and these are considered pits, which are bottomless chasms that cannot be moved over by conventional methods, and they do not block line of sight. All spaces touching a pit area are considered adjacent to the pit area, so any space that is touching the pit but not going into the pit are considered adjacent. Models cannot move into the pit unless they have the extra large size or above, or have the flying ability. These models are allowed to enter the pit area from an adjacent space at a cost of 2 movement. So if a monster has flying, it has to be adjacent, and then it costs 2 points of movement to move into the pit, and then it would go anywhere in the pit that it wants. Anything that targets the pit area will affect all the models in there. For ranged attacks, you would count the entire pit area as 2 spaces. With dynamite and explosives that go off adjacent to a pit will affect all models in the pit. So if a piece of dynamite went off there, it would affect the pit area and then any other areas that are adjacent to it. If dynamite goes off inside the pit, then it's only going to affect the models that are in the pit and not any models that are on the adjacent walls of the pit. And then the one other thing we need to cover are if models end up getting knocked into the pits that normally cannot move into the pit. For enemy models that move into the pit that cannot normally move in, they are immediately killed. And for heroes that get knocked into the pit, they are KO'd and considered to be hanging on the ledge until they can be recovered and must roll on the injury chart as normal. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at the Lavamen now. So in Caverns of Cynder, you're going to get 3 of the Lavamen figures and their card. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of their stats. So they have a basic initiative of 3, so they're going to activate in the middle of the road depending upon the heroes that you take. They have a nasty array of abilities, including Burning Touch, which to hit rolls of a 6 will immediately add a burn marker to the hero that they're targeting. They have a Molten Body, which makes them immune to critical hits from ranged attacks. And they're made from lava, so if they're around any lava spaces or standing on one, they're going to heal wounds based on the number of spaces. Their to hit value for both ranged and melee is standard at 4+, so they're going to do about 50% of the time. When we step into their combat, though, that's when they get nasty. They're going to throw 4 basic dice at 3 damage apiece. And they have a pretty hefty defense at 3 with 10 health, so these guys can take a lot of punishment before they go down. As you add their elite abilities, things get even worse. And when you move over to the brutal side, they're not messing around. They have initiative of 5, and on top of that, when they move into combat, they're going to do 6 damage each hit, with a defense of 3 still and 18 health. Their abilities stay roughly the same, but they do step up with their burning fists. They're going to add D3 markers, and their Ambassadors of Hell ability will make them even nastier against characters that have corruption or mutations.